The last we read of Yitzchak is in last week's Parashat when the Torah states, "So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son being Yitzchak." And now as we open Parashat Hayei Sarah, Yitzchak is nowhere to be found. Not in the story of Sarah's death or her burial. He is absent in the story of Abraham sending his servant Eliezer to find a wife for him. He is not consulted or spoken to. Countless verses and some chapters go by without him. He finally reappears in the narrative after Rivka is chosen to be his bride. And right before meeting her for the first time, the Torah states, "Vayitzchak ba mibo be'er lachai ro'i, v'hu yoshev be'eretz hanegev." Yitzchak had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er lachai ro'i, for he was settled in the region of the Negev. Where was Yitzchak? Near Be'er lachai ro'i, a place that has only been mentioned actually once in the Torah before this moment. Does anyone know where it is? Yes, that's right. It's the moment, I'll tell you. I'm not going to keep you in suspense. It's the moment in chapter 16 of Parashat Lech Lecha. And what happens there? Sarah's pregnant maidservant, Hagar, has fled from her harsh treatment. And she is alone, and an angel of God appears to her and assures her that the baby in her womb will be a great nation, and his name will be Ishmael. And Hagar calls God, Ata El Ro'i. You are the God who sees, one who sees the humiliation to which people are subjected to by others. And then the next verse after that is, Al Kain Kara Be'er Be'er Lachai Ro'i. Therefore the well was called Be'er Lachai Ro'i, meaning the well of the living one who sees me. That's where Yitzchak was. It can't be a coincidence that of all places for Yitzchak to be, he chose to be the one place where Hagar fled to after the harsh treatment of Yitzchak's mother, Sarah. And the commentators also don't see it as a coincidence. They endow this place, Be'er Lachai Ro'i, with profound meaning. Sforno writes that Yitzchak goes to this place to pray because it's the place where the prayer of his mother's maidservant Hagar had been answered. So Yitzchak not only recognizes the potential power of this place as a place to meet God, but it is clear that he is preoccupied with this story of Hagar, which happens even before he is born. If Ishmael is in Hagar's womb, Yitzchak has not yet been born. So he obviously knows the story from having been told it in some way after his birth. And at that place, Hagar is met in her pain and comforted by an angel of God. And Yitzchak, too, is broken and in mourning. After all, this is after the death of his mother, Sarah, and after the Akedah. So the only words I just want to mention that of all the chapters that we hear after Yitzchak is born, from last week's parasha through this week's parasha, the only words we hear from Yitzchak are in the Akedah itself, when he is taken up to Mount Moriah by his father Abraham, and he says, Vayomer Yitzchak el Abraham Aviv, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni Beni, Vayomer Hine Ha'esh V'Ha'itzim V'Ayeh Haseh Le'olah. Father, he says, Yitzchak, and Abraham answers, yes, my son. And Yitzchak says, here is the firestone and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? These are the only words we hear of Yitzchak this whole time. from the time of his birth until really actually in next week's parasha. Perhaps he has a premonition in that moment that he is the one who will be offered up on the altar. Although Yitzchak is ultimately not sacrificed, the question of who will be sacrificed, I think, haunts him for the rest of his life. Like Hagar, whose prayer was answered in Be'er Lachai Ro'i, perhaps he too thought he could be comforted and assured in his brokenness and mourning after the Akedah and after the death of his mother, Sarah. Yitzchak is also preoccupied with the comfort of his father after Sarah's death. One midrash says that when Yitzchak heard that Avraham had sent his servant to find a wife for him, he asked himself, "Can I live with a wife while my father lives alone?" "I will bring Hagar back to him," says the midrash in Genesis Rabbah. He seems to know that Hagar will bring Avraham companionship, love, and comfort. But the midrash also seems to intuit that Yitzchak desires to bring Hagar back after all these years later because she was treated so harshly and cast out of their home. His mother's death allows him to restore Hagar to her rightful place. Professor Yeshaya Leibowitz, a famous professor in Israel in the 20th century, writes that Yitzchak, and he uses the word in Hebrew, litaken, he heals the hurts and the perversion that were caused to Yitzchak and Hagar and to his brother Ishmael. And here is another astonishing midrash. On the verse, after Abraham's death, God blessed his son Yitzchak, who then lived near Be'er Lachai Ro'i. Here it comes again, that same place. Bereshit Rabbati says that even after his father's death, Yitzchak lived near Hagar and treated her with respect. Yitzchak gives kavod, honor, to Hagar in ways that I think he probably couldn't do while his mother and even perhaps his father were alive. These traditional texts, although they're not the midrashim that we know so well, understand that in many ways Yitzchak bears the burdens of the harm that his mother and his father caused him. And not only him, but Hagar as well. In a contemporary Israeli midrash in Dir Shuni, Rachel Velpush takes these traditional midrashim one step further and imagines Yitzchak's encounter at that place, Be'er Lachai Ro'i, after the Akedah. She writes, Yitzchak went and fled, fraught about his father, his mother, and his God. How did it happen that he was bound, that they saw fit to do it, and why did they do it to him? He went to the wilderness, to Be'er Lachai Ro'i, to a place where no man passed or dwelled, and there was Hagar at the well. Yitzchak stood there until he remembered Ishmael, who he had played with him when he was a baby. He remembered Hagar, who had walked away with a jug of water on her shoulder. Yitzchak sat there with Hagar and Ishmael, cried with and shared anger with them for many days. One day he stood at the well, opening, and behold, the living God saw him. The living God heard his voice in the moment, and Yitzchak was comforted. He arose, took Hagar, and brought her back to his father. He also arose and took Ishmael and returned him to his father. And after Abraham dies, it says, his sons Yitzchak and Ishmael buried him. The Midrash ends with the famous verse from Malachi, he shall reconcile parents with children and children with parents. And so does Yitzchak make that possible in this Midrash. Yitzchak talks very little, but his actions speak louder than his words. From the moment of nearly being sacrificed, his life is animated by this question: who is being sacrificed? He goes on a journey of reckoning with the truth. His life is dominated by the wounds inflicted upon him, by the harm they caused himself and others. But at the same time, he is also mourning for the love of his parents and all their goodness, who both die in this week's parasha. Of course, the parasha is named for Sarah, Hayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, but it opens with her death. Vayiyu Hayei Sarah 100 shana ו20 shana ו7 shanim shnei Hayei Sarah. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127. The Midrash explains the unusual construction of her age in this verse to speak of the quality of Sarah's life. At the age of 100, she was just as innocent of sin as she was at the age of 20, when she is regarded as having never sinned. And when she was 20, she was as beautiful as she was when she was 7. Rashi notes the repetition of the words shana, year, to indicate that all of her years were good. So the tradition really glorifies her in the Midrash at her death. And so too of Avraham. Ve'ela yemei shnei chayei Avraham asher chai me'et shana v'shimrim shana v'chamesh shanim. This was the total of Abraham's life, 175 years. Vayigva vayamot Avraham b'seva tova zaken v'savea v'yasef el amav. And Abraham breathed his last breath, dying at an old age and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. It's no wonder that Yitzchak spent some time at Be'er Lachai Roi. It's where Yitzchak learns to hold the entirety of his family's story, the good and the bad and all its complexity. He is not asked to choose to simplify the story of his parents, Abraham and Sarah, nor to erase their goodness, nor their harm, but to hold it all together, which is why he prays at Be'er Lachai Roi to the God of the living well that sees him, which is what it means, and all he has been through. And there he is able to reckon with the truth and to do his part to bring some measure of healing. And there he is able to find comfort and love and look to the future, which is what happens exactly in that moment. He looks and sees Rivka. No person, no community, no country is perfect. For all the traditions desire to idealize and idolize our ancestors, our people, our land, there are countless stories told of the need to reckon with our flaws. Our greatest hope comes from our willingness to look at and seek to understand the totality of all the good and all the harm a person or a country can do, and to not turn away. Healing is only possible when we are willing to look at the whole truth. The only way to build a future of comfort, of love, and justice is by digging deep into the full story and committing to a future where no one, not one person, needs to be sacrificed.